All right, welcome everyone to the March 2024 roadmap to ranked choice voting here in Washington. We're so delighted to have you. Tonight we have a really exciting panel as we're launching our series of ranked choice voting in action. How does ranked choice voting help different spaces? Who does it help? Why is it good for all of us? We are here tonight with climate advocates to talk about the ways that climate supports, how ranked choice voting supports our climate advocacy. You'll be seeing links dropped into the chat throughout the evening from our incredible organizer, Stephanie Jong. And for now, I am going to turn it over to Nilu Jenks, our political director. I should introduce myself quickly too. My name's Carrie. I'm the organizing manager here at Fair Vote Washington. And some of you have seen me before, and I'm excited for you to get to see more of Nilu tonight. If we can bring Nilu onto the screen, and she will introduce our panelists and get going.
Hi, everybody. I am excited to be here tonight. Last month, somebody asked, how does ranked choice voting help with our climate emergency? And so as someone who came to ranked choice voting through climate advocacy, I knew that there are people with wonderful responses and answers to that question. So we have invited three folks from three wonderful orgs doing work in our region. Robert Cruikshank with Sierra Club, Shannon Grimes with Sightline Institute, and Karina Solorio with the Washington Conservation Action. So they're here to answer a little bit about this question, but also to speak about their own work because, you know, they're great partners and doing great things in our state. We thought it'd be great to connect people who have those concerns with these orgs too. So I'm just going to go into the questions unless, to ask each of you really, if you want to share a little bit about your orgs and, what's important to you all right now. And then we'll jump into the ranked choice voting question maybe. So what's the mission of your orgs? I can pick on one of you. Robert, you're right to the right of me. How about you start and then you can pick.
Sure. Thanks, Nilu and Carrie and everyone for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity to be part of this. So my name is Robert Cruikshank. I'm vice chair of the Sierra Club Seattle group, involved in the Washington State chapter of the Sierra Club, and have been involved in advocacy around different issues related to expanding democracy for many years. And so I'm really happy to be a part of this conversation. At the Sierra Club, we work together to protect our communities and the planet. We want to educate and enlist people to protect and restore the quality of the natural and human environment. And we recognize that we do that through the democratic process. We do that through advocacy. We do that through electoral work. We sometimes go to the courts when needed. And through all of that, we recognize that democracy and the ability to shape political power and shape who represents us in office turns out to be an incredibly important element of how we get environmental justice, racial justice, social justice, and how we can tackle the climate crisis. I know we can talk a little bit more about how this shakes out in terms of climate, but when you don't have a properly functioning democracy, there are a lot of downstream effects of that, and one of them is the climate crisis we see today. So we believe at the Sierra Club that things like ranked choice voting are essential. Many of our chapters around the country have signed on to endorse ranked choice voting initiatives in their cities or their states. So we're very happy to be part of that effort. We've done so here, and we're excited to continue working with Fair Vote Washington and anyone else interested in helping to expand our democracy. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Shannon, do you want to share a little bit about Sightline Institute and the mission of your organization?
Sure, thanks, Nilu. So Sightline is a public policy think tank, and so we do evidence-based research and analysis on a whole range of issues. Our mission is to make Cascadia a global model of sustainability, and so we see that as strong communities, a green economy, and a healthy environment. So our focus areas include affordable housing and low-carbon cities, accelerating a transition to fossil fuels, from fossil fuels to clean energy, identifying solutions for resilience and health in our rural lands, and reforming our elections to create a democracy that is more representative of our communities. So we work in Alaska, Washington, Oregon, some in Idaho, Montana, British Columbia. This is what we call Cascadia. And we really believe that true sustainability exists kind of at the intersection of environmental health and social justice. And so this sort of bigger concept of sustainability and what that means, and that's at the heart of everything that we do. I think we can't have climate justice without social justice, and we really need democratic systems to achieve those. Our democracy work is one of our newer programs, and we can speak a little bit more to that. But we started it because, as Robert was saying, we know that there's a lot of support for climate action publicly, but it's not an urgent priority among a lot of lawmakers. And so after working on climate policy for 30 years, at some point we sort of realized, well, we can just keep banging our head against the wall, but or we could try to actually fix some of these underlying structural challenges. So, we can't make the progress that we want to see on all of these other aspects of sustainability if we're not shoring up the systems that make our democracy work for people and, elected officials represent the will of the people.
Thanks, Shannon. Appreciate that. Karina, do you want to share a little bit about Washington Conservation Action and your mission?
Yeah, sorry everyone. I'm Karina. I'm the Yakima community organizer with Washington Conservation Action. And Washington Conservation Action, they collaborate with legislators, partners, and the public to advocate for the passage of legislation promoting environmental justice. Our primary focus areas compose of climate and clean energy, fossil fuels, forestry, and the Puget Sound. And we achieve this by strengthening our democracy and mobilizing our communities. Through our political program, we contribute to the election of environmentally conscious leaders, which we call our environmental champions. So yeah, by identifying and endorsing these candidates who prioritize environmental concerns and holding these elected officials accountable is also a key aspect of our work, and that involves community education on voting records, exerting pressure on lawmakers to address environmental issues promptly. And we also recently launched our Tribal Nations program and Native Vote Washington. And these initiatives aim to forge partnerships with some of the Washington tribes to advance tribal sovereignty and foster Indigenous leadership within our communities.
Thank you. I hope everyone can tell why I love these orgs and partnering with them. Especially, I expect a lot of people joining tonight care about climate change. And just so you know, there have been a few people who wrote to ask that we make sure to send a recording of this one out. So I appreciate you all being here. And, more specifically, if you're able, I know it's a harder question, but why partner with Fair Vote and ranked choice voting? Robert, you spoke a little bit to that, but if any of you want to expand on that, how do you see ranked choice voting as something that does help advance some of the struggles we're seeing with legislators not prioritizing climate, like Shannon, you mentioned? So yeah, I'll turn that anybody who wants to take this on, or a little group chat. It's a little hard on Zoom, but we can try our best.
I'm happy to jump in and sort of build off of what Robert was saying earlier, but I really think there's a sort of starting big picture and really thinking about democracy work and elections reform work overall. We really see it as a core part of what we do, just because climate change is a big, complicated, wicked problem, and it requires sustained action over many years, and this sort of collective action that we need. Well, we have a mechanism for collective action, and that is government. But we can't use it if our systems of self-government are broken and the structures that enable us to participate effectively. And so that's really where we see the work as really essential. As a data-focused organization, it's a little bit tough to connect some of these really specific electoral changes causally with concrete changes in climate change policy. But there is some evidence. So, an example is that there's, some studies that show that proportional representation, which one can get through, proportional ranked choice voting, countries that have proportional representation have better climate policies. And another example is that women elected leaders tend to support climate policies more, ranked choice voting tends to help more women run and win office. And so we see some elements of this, but at base, I think I see it a little bit more as a philosophical argument about this collective willpower. Because when our democracies are strong, when people believe that their vote matters and that their leaders listen, it means that we, the collective we, are confident that we can solve these big problems together. And we need that willpower in order to tackle this collective crisis of climate change. So that's really why shoring up democracy is so important to us.
I'll just add from my part, I think, ranked choice voting really makes candidates talk about the issues and focus on priorities more than, for example, negative campaign ads. And that's one of the things that we need to talk about with climate is the issues and solutions. And I think it really highlights ranked choice voting, brings that forward. And that's one reason why I think it's helpful too. Karina or Robert, did you want to add anything or?
Sure, just briefly. We've seen RCV in action a few times around the country. There's some places like the Bay Area where I'm sure you all know it's been in existence, some of the cities there for some time. States like Maine, Alaska, states like New York. And one consistent thing we see is that there's a recognition by candidates that they need to work hard to try to get support from interest groups and advocates and communities. And we at Sierra Club have been evolving our own political guidelines, which used to be super strict that you just endorse one person, don't do dual endorsements, and recognizing that in a ranked choice environment world, that's not necessarily the best strategy from a climate perspective. And so we're starting to look at how do you leverage that, our endorsement and the people who actively seek that to say that, there's a strategy here where we want multiple candidates to come to us and seek our support and have a really bold climate agenda that is rooted in environmental justice and equity. And we want to reward candidates for doing that. We don't just want to be stuck in a place where it's just one person. And ranked choice allows that and allows coalitions to be built, which we find really valuable, especially being able to reach out of a partisan dynamic. Now, we know in some states, this stuff is just inherently partisan, but in some states it's not. And when you get to the local level at a city, everyone's in one party, for example. I think we know that here in Seattle. And so it becomes really helpful then to be able to build those broader coalitions among different candidates, and ranked choice voting, at least what we've seen so far, seems to suggest that that's a greater possibility.
Thank you. That's such a great point as well, because that is something that we celebrate. You can endorse multiple candidates, and that's something that we see. Karina, I saw you. Are you off? No, it looked like you came off mute for me. Did you want to add anything or?
Yeah, and I also did want to add that, we need strong democracy in order to get some of this strong, climate legislation to pass and things like that. And especially in a place like here in Yakima, where I'm primarily working, it's very difficult to get, progressives into office here. So something like ranked choice voting would make things a lot easier for people. Not only that, it also, the overall goal of ranked choice voting is essentially to get to bring in more of a voter turnout. And that's also like a big issue that we have here in Yakima, is the lack of voter turnout during elections. So yeah, I think that's one of the big reasons why WCA wants to partner with democracy reforms such as this, to get strong democracy, especially in our communities where we that isn't something that we already have in place.
Yeah, thank you. Yakima, definitely a lot of eyes on Yakima right now, and I really appreciate you being here and highlighting that. It's one of the reasons that ranked choice voting also really matters to me on many levels. I'm just gonna throw out to the audience really quickly. I'm only gonna ask a couple more questions, so if you have questions, you can throw them in the chat, and we'll try to get them answered for you, not just from, I can also try and answer some of your questions, or I hope to. Next question. What are common misconceptions about climate advocacy? Or concerns about how the issue is presented in society, or however you want to interpret the question, really?
I think something that's very notable to me, of a misconception, is that it's this like progressive liberal issue when it just really is not at all. Like it's going to affect everyone. And it's not just the people that advocate for this climate advocacy. They're not just, you know, rich, old, retired white people, and they're not, you know, rich white college students either. I mean, it's really anybody that should care about these matters and is being affected by these issues. So I think that's one of the bigger ones that I've noticed, especially in the region that I work in.
Yeah, I want to strongly second that. I think that is spot on what Karina said. There's a, I don't want to say it's a misconception. I think in some cases it is a correct conception based on who steps forward and who's pushed forward. That is, you know, a movement of largely, you know, the white privileged upper classes. We know in reality that's not the case, that there are plenty of people who are active from all across the spectrum who are so many different backgrounds coming together to try to do climate action, but that's not something that is often prioritized. And so we at the Sierra Club have worked really hard and are continuing to work hard, because God knows we still have quite a lot of work to do on that front to show that, no, this really is a broad-based movement. And I think this is where RCV comes in. You know, how do you lower the barriers to entry to elected office? And, you know, in Seattle, we do things like democracy vouchers. You know, we talk about when do elections happen, odd versus even years, but anything we can do to make it easier for people who don't look like me to get elected to office is critically important to making climate action a success. And we're heartened by evidence we see around the country. And again, if you look at cities or states where RCV exists, you will see that it is not people who look like me who are always benefiting from it. And we think that is a huge advantage, not just in and of itself for issues of racial and social justice, which you do care about, but we think it's also connected to how we get climate crisis acted upon, because it can't just be in a silo. It can't just be in the progressive silo or the upper white middle class silo or the Democratic Party silo. We got to bring it out, because that is actually where our support is. Our support, the people across this country who care about climate, are not siloed. Our movements can't be either.
Yeah, I'll echo a lot of those thoughts. And I think that in part, I think it's become a progressive issues because, or a progressive affiliated, you know, issue, because there's only two choices. We have Republicans and we have Democrats, and ranked choice voting can play a big role in opening up to other viewpoints and other parties, and leaving room for more coalition building across issues and across ideas. We actually saw that. I was thinking of other examples. In Maine, the Green Party has been very excited about ranked choice voting, because it means that people can vote for the Green Party as their first candidate and not have to worry about that candidate spoiling the vote for, you know, the next candidate, perhaps the Democrat, who might be, you know, still okay on environmental issues, but perhaps not the best. And any votes that go, you know, first choice to a Green Party candidate, you can look at those vote totals and say, wow, you know, this person didn't win, they didn't get a majority, but they have 20% support. This is clearly an issue that people care about. And so it's another way of just communicating preferences and to say, this is what people care about, and that this is an issue that people care about, and it's not just party lines.
Absolutely. You can actually highlight your preference, your priorities and causes, like you said. You know, a question from the audience from Scott is relevant to what you've all just been saying. Somehow both climate and democracy have become tribal, yet improving both is better for everybody. Is there anything you think Fair Vote Washington can learn from you in appealing to both sides of the aisle, or vice versa?
I think it's be willing to have conversations and don't have preconceived notions. I mean, you will run into, there are definitely Republicans you will run into who are, you know, ideologically opposed to climate action. You'll also run into Democrats who are strongly opposed to climate action. You will run into Democrats and progressives who think ranked choice voting is great. You will also run into Republicans who think ranked choice voting is great. You don't know who unless you're willing to have that conversation. And I think that's really true for any issue, really, but particularly this one. We're not, you know, we're all nonpartisan organizations here. And many of us, our organizations who do endorsements, will endorse members of both parties and other parties as well, as we feel necessary. And those are conversations we have internally, but ranked choice voting makes those conversations, I think, even more relevant because it drags it less out of the partisan back and forth and more into a question of how are you building a winning coalition? Because in order to prevail under RCV, you have to be able to build a winning coalition. You have to be able to appeal to people who didn't rank your candidate first. Because very, very, very few people win on the first pass. So we think that's a really helpful way to pull these issues that we care about that can get so polarized when they become identified with one party or the other, and make it easier for people to participate too. People who live in a community where, you know, one party dominates and that party may not at the moment be as interested in climate action as another one might be, but gosh, they still want to get involved. You know, if you have systems like RCV, we've seen in other states and cities that it does seem to make it easier for people to participate.
I think too, it's an encouragement for people to work together once they do get elected, because you see you don't have to just sort of toe the party line. You know, you've seen Lisa Murkowski up in Alaska be able to take a little bit more of her own stances on things because she is protected by this electoral system, and she doesn't have to worry about getting primaried out by you know, an extreme Republican candidate. And so it's a way of encouraging people to look at, you know, each individual issue and not just have to sort of like move through something in that polarization way. And so I think the hope too is that it would increase some of that willingness to work together. And if we're going to pass any of these major policies and have them last for years, we can't just sort of, you know, even if it's like, oh, we could elect a bunch of people perhaps that are climate supporting, and if that doesn't continue years down the road, then the pendulum's gonna turn the other way, and those policies are not going to last, and it's not going to be sustainable. And that's a lot of what we see in the country right now. And so I think, you know, ranked choice voting has the, you know, an opportunity to mitigate that to some extent.
Absolutely. And we see that. I just saw her say that, and Lisa Murkowski say that on a panel on how it's changed how she can legislate, which is a huge benefit. And yes, Robert, I love that idea that talk to everybody about climate and about making no assumptions about where people stand. Karina, did you have any thoughts on what Fair Vote Washington can learn from Washington Conservation Action?
Yeah, I think the only thing that I really wanted to add that Shannon and Robert, I think they did a really good job at answering it. But yeah, just yeah, coming into conversations without any like made up assumptions about people. Yeah, just being open. And again, like, I mean, it could be anyone that agrees with you or disagrees with you, so you really can't assume things.
And I love that, Robert, you made that point about why ranked choice voting naturally makes people lean in that direction. So thank you, Karina, on that point as well. I'm going to ask another question here from John Burnell. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. He says, I suppose that Sightline, Washington Conservation Action, and Sierra Club locally have not taken a specific stand on proportional ranked choice voting. Are your organizations discussing making PRCV a priority?
I can start. That's an easy one for us. Proportional ranked choice voting is already a priority, and it's really sort of at the heart of where we see it going, and kind of some of the potential of ranked choice voting is its ability to become a more proportional system with a multi-member ranked choice voting election. And so we really see that is opens up a lot more possibilities for better representation of the communities that we sit in. And we're excited to kind of look towards that longer term.
Yeah, I know Washington Conservation Action is, they're also very supportive of that. I don't have much details because I'm not in the political team. But yeah, I think that's for sure something that they're very supportive of.
Yeah, I'd say the same for us at Sierra Club. I think it's something that we think is, as Shannon put, like sort of a natural next step. And so we're excited for that. I think we can all look around and see that while there are a lot of people in this city, state, and country who care deeply about the climate, it's incredibly difficult to get traction on it, to get legislative change. And when you do, it feels like it's tenuous. So things that not just open up the doors to better representation a little bit, they're nice, and let's keep pushing that door open. But that's where we'd like to be.
I love to hear that. I did know some of that, and thank you for the question, John. Another question here from Chris Mason. How can ranked choice voting supporters help their friends who think that climate is the only issue they care about, get them to consider that how people are elected makes a difference on who gets elected? I can read
Sure.
that.
I mean, one thing that comes to my mind as I think about this question of democracy is, folks may remember, I think it's the summer of 2021, I think it was Greenpeace recorded a oil company lobbyist talking about how they were working with Joe Manchin and others in the Senate to undermine Biden's climate agenda. And, I think there's certainly discussion about how far that climate agenda went and could have gone, but there's also the fact that in Congress it was being systematically undermined by Manchin and others. And what you have are people who leverage the electoral systems we have in this country to protect those who have power and money. And who in this country has more power or money than the fossil fuel industry? They work incredibly hard at the city, state, and federal level to protect that and to protect that investment and to try to stop all the rest of us from building a better future. And, yes, we can talk to everybody. We don't make preconceived notions when we talk to people. All of that is absolutely correct in how we should continue to organize. And at the same time, we have to be real that the way this political system, this country is stacked against us. And I think us more broadly, those who care about democracy, those who care about justice in all of its forms, particularly environmental justice, this doesn't work. And to us, greater democracy, greater participation, we believe, in most cases, is going to lead to better outcomes for the climate. Not always, right? We still have to contest every election. We still have to be very aware of efforts, like we'll see on the ballot later this year in Washington, to undo some of the climate work we've already achieved. But I think to Chris's question, which is a good one, people are well aware of what the Supreme Court decisions like Citizens United have done to our country and the role of money in politics. People understand the Electoral College and how distorting that can be. It seems to be an awareness of democracy being under threat, and how do we fix that? And part of fixing that is looking at better ways to run our elections. And one of the real advantages, I think, of RCV is that it's worked. It's been in operation. This is not a good idea that someone came up with or a good idea we have to import from some other part of the globe. You can see it functioning in this country right now. It's real, it's tangible, and it works. And I think that's a huge advantage.
I think that was very well said, and I don't have a lot to add there, Robert, but I'll maybe add one thing, which is I think that sometimes there's this perception that climate advocacy is really divorced from other issues and separated from impacts on people. And so I think bringing back to this idea of, the planet itself is going to be fine. We need to act on climate change because we need to protect ourselves and humanity, and that it is for our fellow humans and our future humans that we need to make changes here. And so I think, we can get really caught up in atmospheric data numbers and all sorts of things. But I think to me that, keeping people at the heart of climate advocacy, making sure that we're really looking at who is most affected, both by challenges and possible solutions, and really engaging everybody carefully in the process and making sure that people have a voice in what is being done. That is also why democracy is so essential, is because it is this method of bringing people in.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add that I think that's also like a big misconception about climate issues, and that it's not a standalone issue. It really touches a lot of other issues. Like, for example, like one of the reasons when they were planning to do a climate action plan for Yakima, one of the reasons why they were suggesting not to do that is because We have the houseless crisis going on here in Yakima, and that's, I mean, big. But that's also that's also like a climate issue, not only for the obvious that people are out in the streets being directly impacted by the climate, but it also it affects things like mental health. He exacerbates things like schizophrenia, things like that. So yeah, I think that's like a little example of how like it's not a standalone issue. It touches pretty much essentially everything if you really think about it.
Yeah, we're always sitting in the environment, so we're always impacted in so many ways. Thank you. Are there any unlikely political bedfellows that you anticipate working together on climate change if we elect candidates for under ranked choice voting? Is there unexpected partnerships you think could happen if it opens the gateways to a different way? Like Lisa Murkowski said, she can govern in a wholly different way. Can you work in a different way?
I mean, I can only speak to the west side of the mountains because that's where I'm most familiar. I'm curious what Karina's experience with this is east side of the mountains, but farmers. We've encountered a lot of conversations with farmers west of the mountains who are very well aware of the climate crisis. For various reasons, they're often voting for Republicans, but they care about climate a lot. And they can have an influential role to play in elections, but that gets diluted when you have all these safe seats everywhere. And you can't fix that through redistricting. You have to really gerrymander the heck out of the state to try to make everything a purple state, and to a degree that would be really unacceptable. But we believe that there are a lot of folks in the farm community who are not going to be climate allies, but there are some who are. And we believe that that's a potential source of potentially unlikely bedfellows in climate activism. But again, there's limits to that. I'm curious what you hear from east of the mountains.
Yeah, so actually something that happened not a few weeks ago actually. With the help of Senator King, we got some money, some funding for the Cowiche's Canyon Trail, which is phase 2 of the trail. Yeah, and if you know anything about Senator King, he's not a climate advocate. He's not an environmental champion. But yeah, we really posed the budget proposal as it being like kind of like a community type of thing. But really, it's for conservation. We're going to be, conserving the native plant and things like that. So yeah, that's something that happened recently. Yeah, and I'm assuming more things like that are going to happen, especially with the new redistricting. But yeah, I'll let you know, Robert.
Any unexpected partners you see in your future, Shannon, if we get ranked choice voting through?
It's a good question. I don't work directly with a lot of our, climate partners, so I have a little bit less familiarity with that. But I think I would add on to Robert's point, a lot of the forestry partners as well. I think that is an untapped area for collaboration. And I also see some potential with more business partnerships, and that there are many businesses that know the impacts and, are traditionally supported a little bit more by one party than another, although often both. But I think that there will potentially be some more impacts coming there too.
Thank you. And if you think that this is another from Steve Dill, that was actually a question from Carrie. I missed that. She popped in a question for me. Sorry. Good one, your fortune telling question. But now Steve Dill asks, if ranked choice voting is a key to advancing climate legislation, is there anything that we at Fairwood Washington can do to draw more support from climate lobbies? Like, how can we share our message and share something that you all have embraced to gain more support generally from climate advocates?
I think doing more things like this is like a really good step.
So I really appreciate you guys being here. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd strongly agree with Karina on that.
Is it 3 for 3, Shannon? No. Sorry. add here.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of what we've been saying earlier of opening up and being willing to listen and talk through about other issues and listen to other priorities and be able to make some connections, you know, really knowing a lot of the data behind the impacts of RCV, being able to pull from existing cities and other places that have done it and show results and show some changes that have concretely happened and where we can move forward from there.
Okay, and then I have some questions here about proportional ranked choice voting. Do you think, how can we make it clear that proportional ranked choice voting isn't a trick like gerrymandering? I don't know if you all have any thoughts on that. I don't know who asked that question. It might.
I just think quickly, so many of us have done a lot of work over the years, and in some cases decades, around educating people about the climate crisis. And sometimes, you know, going into the data, going into the causes, going into the solutions. And I feel similarly around democracy reform, whether it's proportional ranked choice voting or dealing with gerrymandering or whatever the case may be. I think that being able to educate our friends, families, neighbors, and organizations is essential. And that education doesn't happen once, it doesn't happen overnight, but it's an ongoing effort over months and years that gets you there. And so I think looking at the reforms we want and being able to push for them and realizing, you know, we're not going to convince someone overnight. We're not going to get legislation done in a single session. That'd be nice, but you got to commit to a longer term effort. And I think you start to really make headway and see change happen.
I was going to say something very similar. I think it's certainly a long-term educational effort, and that there's a lot of work to do around that, around the impacts of districts, and you know, even when you can do this, we've seen some of this play out in Yakima, as we have been alluding to a little bit, and it's just spreading the word, getting people more familiar with it, getting people comfortable with the idea. It will take time.
Yeah, I don't have anything else to add besides just continued education is definitely going to be needed.
Yeah, building trust in elections is something that is definitely a national conversation now, and really, I do think education is a huge part of that. You know, and talking to our neighbors, and our neighbors talking to their neighbors, is probably the most powerful thing I think we can do. So really, I think the last question here is, what are you most hopeful for as we head into a year of elections and changes?
Can jump in. I'll say, you know, I think people know that this is going to be a big election, and that is exciting in a lot of ways because it means that the attention is on our democracy and what that looks like. So I think I have some hope that people are going to be paying more attention to what it means to participate in a democracy, and also see some of the current flaws in the system, and that, you know, leads to an opportunity to move towards something a little bit better. And it feels like we're continuing to build momentum around ideas that actually work, that do make a difference, that is really inspiring. And I find hope in that.
I think that, you know, it's easy to focus on the very real and enormous threats that we face this year. But there's also, I have hope that we respond with a vision that inspires people to get engaged. And I think of President Biden's State of the Union address earlier this month, when he came out swinging and not just criticizing, you know, his opponent, but really inspiring people to get behind a really strong vision of a better future. And I think that, and it seems to have an impact positively for him in the polls. And I think that should be a lesson to all of us and a reminder what happens when we call people in to be part of something wonderful and amazing that gives them hope, especially in a year when there's so much angst coming out of years of trauma, of a pandemic, of racial injustice and ongoing oppressions. Right? One campaign's not going to solve that, but people want hope. And I think that providing that in a campaign setting or even working on democracy reform shows people there's a way out of this. It doesn't have to always be this way. And my hope is that people recognize that and see power in that, not just to win a certain election, but to inspire themselves to be part of a better future.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to a couple things. Working on things to, repel initiative 2117. We're opposing that, of course. Then we have the new redistricting here in Yakima, so that's going to be very exciting, very dramatic. And then I think there's also like a lot of really amazing candidates that like have announced that they're running just in the last few months that I'm really excited and feel optimistic about. So yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to, is getting to know them more, and yeah, helping them win.
Thank you. I always love hearing what people are hopeful about. I think sharing our hopes is really important. So I appreciate you answering and thinking about that question. And I lied. There is one more question. What are the best way folks can go learn more about your organizations and some of the stuff you're working about? It's an easy question. I hope it's one that you don't mind answering, because I want them to know what you're working on.
Yeah, I wanted to plug in. We have a new ambassador program at WCA that is, I think, just a few weeks old. But yeah, I think that's a really good way to or the best way for if you want to be more involved in what the work the WCA is doing. I think, yeah, sign up for that. And I think, yeah, you get like a lot of exclusive things on there that I don't know exactly what they are, but I've heard a lot of cool things, and I think people should check it out.
Thank you. We dropped a chat in the link, folks. You should definitely check it out.
And for us, sierraclub.org/Washington is our state chapter here. The first thing you'll see there is a calendar of events. We've got events happening up and down the state, both east and west. All sorts of things in your local community to get engaged in climate advocacy, community building, even outings as the weather starts to turn more amenable to going on hikes and things. So get to meet your neighbors and either take action on the environment or climate, or at least just go out and enjoy the beauty that is Washington State.
That's great. We also have a website, sightline.org, and we have some newsletter lists. So each of our program areas has a dedicated newsletter list. So you can sign up for all of those if you'd like to get reports about our new research that's coming out, emails from me and my colleagues. And we have occasional events, although not very often. We're more focused on the research end of things.
Thank you all. You're 3 orgs that I know and love, and I hope that people in the audience learn more. And we'll share. Honestly, one of the questions was, what can we do? Please share this video to teach people that are interested in the climate, about this connection with ranked choice voting and the climate, but also to hear from some of the representatives of these orgs doing great work in our state that I personally am very grateful for. So thank you for your time. Thank you for saying yes. And I hope I'll see you around. I know I will. So thank you.
Thank you.
You guys, thank you so much. That was so amazing. I feel so re-inspired. I mean, I get to do this work every day, and logically, I do know why ranked choice voting is so important for climate, but it is so refreshing to hear it said. So thank you, Robert. Thank you, Shannon. Thank you, Karina. That was incredible. Thank you, Nilu, for hosting us. I also really, I want to call, go ahead.
Can I throw one more thank you out? I don't remember who asked the question in the last roadmap, but thank you for that question. It really is what led to this. And so thank you for your questions in the audience. It's important. So sorry to interrupt really quickly, Carrie, on the video. Say bye, folks.
No worries. I actually also want to circle back to something Nilu said, and one of the most impactful ways to make change is talking to our neighbors, getting involved out in the community, which is leading me directly into our next point, that we are coming up on summer tabling season. And there is no better way to hear about how amazing tabling is than from people who do it. So I would love to welcome to the screen with me, Maggie Karshner. Maggie is one of our most stalwart tabling volunteers down in the South Sound. Maggie, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course. I'm going to ask Maggie a few questions about what ranked choice voting means to her, what tabling means, and then we're going to ask you to get involved. Maggie, when did you first learn about ranked choice voting, and why did you choose to get involved with Fair Vote Washington?
Yeah, I learned about ranked choice voting with the airing of the episode of the Patriot Act back in June 2020. And I remember there was like this very strong call to action, like there are organizations trying to bring this to places near you. And so I went on Google and I found Fair Vote and I was like, put me on your email list. And the rest is history.
The rest is history. I love a proactive person. Thank you. Maggie, it is rumored that you really love tabling, that you're great at it, and that you do it often.
No, those are all lies, utter lies. No. Yes, I love tabling.
Tabling loves you. Can you tell us about what your favorite parts of tabling are and why you love it so much?
I love talking to people. I mean, I found Fair Vote like in the midst of the pandemic. So, and I'm a bit of a raging extrovert. So like I was a little pent up. And then there was an opportunity to table and I went and like the rest is really history. Yeah, so what I love is getting to talk to people. That's members of Fair Vote, that's members of the public, that's like just being out at these events. Sometimes events that I wouldn't have thought to attend and are now like my favorites. So it's a really good time.
Absolutely. I love that. Yeah, we really do get to talk to so many people of all different walks of life, of political stripes, and it's really fun to talk to people who don't know about ranked choice voting and give them a solution, because most people are pretty fed up with politics. So it is actually just a really fun time. Why do you think people here in this audience should table with you this summer?
Because it's really fun. Like I said, it's not just that you're talking to strangers, but you're also like getting to see Fair Vote folks like face to face, which, you know, we're all on screens these days. It's really nice to like share actual meet space with folks. And we table in the summer when the weather's nice. So like, if you're not going for a hike or something, this is second best.
It honestly is, because you really also need to bring snacks and you need to bring water and you need to bring your good attitude, just like when you would go hiking. And, you know, navigating through the parking lot to find the table. We appreciate that. I'm also going to drop in the chat if there's somewhere we should table this summer. Please let us know. We are excited to be going to the same places we've always been, but we're also really excited to go to places we haven't been. Washington is a really big state and there's a lot of voters to talk to, and you all are the best people to let us know where that is. So thank you so much. If somebody has never tabled before, what would you tell them? And maybe what would you tell them as an extrovert? And if you can summon the empathy, if you're an introvert, what would you tell them?
I have plenty of empathy. I think the key thing here is that it's fun. It's supposed to be fun. So if everything I've described sounds like torture, like maybe this is not the way you contribute. There's other ways. But if you're at all curious, I know sometimes folks are a little bit scared, like you kind of have to like jump in and like just show up and like, and that feels scary, but it's not that big of a deal. You've always got a buddy there. Like there's at least one other person at the table with you. They're probably somebody who has done this a lot more than you. And you can kind of listen to them do their spiel until you're feeling comfortable with it. You give it a shot. You also can always refer questions. Like I know even to this day, folks will ask me questions where I'm like, I do not know what the answer to that is. Why don't you talk to this person? Or let me get your contact info and I will get you an answer, right? Like it's very low pressure sort of environment. So don't hesitate to just jump in if it sounds like you might be interested and it might be a good time.
I mean, it's a good time. It's a really good time. But I love those answers. It's so true. You don't have to know everything. You don't have to be perfect at it. Really, people just also want to talk to you. So it's a really fun time. I think you've already given us lots of nuggets of wisdom, but is there another nugget of wisdom you would like to leave us with?
Do it, try it. That's my nugget of wisdom. Like, if you're not trying it, are you really living? Like, come table with me. That's my nugget.
These are the questions we need to ask ourselves.
Mhm.
If you're not trying tabling, have you lived?
You'll never
I've
know.
heard the gateway to other forms of volunteerism. So maybe just give it a try. Just give it a try. It's pretty safe on the other side. We can promise. Thank you so much, Maggie. It's always a delight to see you. Come table with us. And if tabling isn't for you, there's lots of other ways to get involved. There is a pledge form in the chat. Please pledge to volunteer with us. We will find a way to give you an opportunity that is meaningful, that is comfortable for you, or is an opportunity that will help you stretch your comfort zone. And you get to hang out with Maggie. So come back. She's here all night. All right. Thank you so much, Maggie.
You're welcome.
Appreciate you. All right. So we have asked you to commit to a tabling shift, or that pledge in there is to commit to a tabling shift. It could also be to phone bank with us. It could also be to give a presentation to a community group that you care about. The opportunities are truly endless. I next want to alert you to a really exciting opportunity, which is another way to get involved, which is to give money and also to hear from people who are interesting to you. We are hosting a Hall of Fame Democracy Champions Luncheon. It is a mouthful, but it's also a mouthful of delicious brunch. We will be celebrating the state legislators who worked so hard to move the Washington Voices Act as far as it got in a really tough legislative session. So please join us on April 19th at noon. We will be in South Seattle. We would love to see you there. We'll again be featuring some of our key legislators, and they would love to get to know the people who support this work from the ground up. So if we can drop that link in the chat, that would be awesome. Maybe I can do it. We just really appreciate you all. So thank you so much for being here tonight. Thank you for learning with us about the ways ranked choice voting is going to be a really useful tool to both cool the political climate, but also our actual climate. We really hope to have a long, prosperous, happy life here on Earth and here in the US and here in Washington. So thank you so much for being with us here tonight. And we will see you next month for our next Ranked Choice Voting in Action webinar. And stay tuned for what our topic will be. All right, take good care, everyone.